There's a reason home invasion stories get under our skin. Your home is supposed to be your safe place, the one spot in the world where you can let your guard down. But what happens when that safety is shattered? When the locks, the walls, the routines you trust can't keep the darkness out? These are 3 true stories of home invasions. Each one a reminder that sometimes the scariest things don't wait for you outside. They come right to your door. Story 1. The Man in the Hallway. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Minneapolis. My parents were the kind who double-checked every lock and set the alarm every night. We had a dog, motion lights, and a neighborhood watch. I never thought twice about being safe at home until the night everything changed. It was a Friday in late October. My parents were out at a dinner party, and I was home alone, finishing up homework in my room. I was 16, old enough to be trusted, but still young enough to get spooked by every creak and groan of the house. Around 10:30, I heard the dog barking downstairs. Not his usual bark, but a deep, frantic sound that made my skin crawl. I went to the top of the stairs and called his name. He didn't stop. I could hear his nails scrambling on the hardwood, the jingle of his collar. Then, suddenly, silence. I waited, heart pounding, but the house was dead quiet. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a raccoon outside, or a car backfiring. I went back to my room and tried to focus on my math homework. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. I froze. My parents weren't due home for another hour. The dog never barked again. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was in the house. She told me to stay quiet, lock the door, and hide. I slid my desk chair under the doorknob and crawled into the closet, clutching my phone so hard my knuckles hurt. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I heard the floorboards creak outside my room, then the soft click of the doorknob turning. The door rattled. Once, twice, then silence. I held my breath, listening. The operator stayed on the line, her voice calm and steady. Police are on the way. Stay hidden. I heard the sound of drawers being opened, things being moved around. Whoever was out there was searching for something, or someone. After what felt like hours, I heard sirens outside. The footsteps retreated down the stairs, the front door slammed, and the dog started barking again. This time, a high, panicked yelp. The police found the back door pried open, muddy footprints in the hallway, and my dog cowering under the kitchen table. They never caught the man who broke in. For weeks after, I jumped at every sound, slept with the lights on, and never felt truly safe in that house again. Story 2. The Window. My friend Lila lived in a small apartment on the 2nd floor of an old building downtown. She was a night owl, always up late reading or watching movies. One night, she was sitting on her couch, headphones on, when she heard a tapping at the window. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but the tapping got louder, more insistent. She pulled off her headphones and listened. The tapping stopped. She got up and peeked through the blinds. Nothing, just the empty fire escape and the glow of the streetlights. She shrugged it off and went back to her book. A few minutes later, she heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was faster, almost frantic. She stood up, heart racing, and walked to the window. As she reached for the blinds, she saw a shadow move outside, a tall, thin figure, pressed up against the glass. She screamed and stumbled back, grabbing her phone to call 911. The figure started pounding on the window, harder and harder, until the glass rattled in the frame. Lila ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The police arrived within minutes. They found the man still on the fire escape, trying to pry open the window with a crowbar. He was arrested on the spot. Later, they found out he'd broken into 3 other apartments in the building that month. Always through the windows, always late at night. Lila moved out a week later. She still can't sleep with the windows open, and she always checks the locks, twice. Story 3. The Silent House. This one happened to my cousin Ben, who lived in a rural farmhouse miles from the nearest neighbor. He was used to the quiet, the darkness, the way the wind rattled the old windows at night. But one winter, when his wife was away visiting family, he learned just how terrifying that silence could be. It was a snowy night, the kind where the world feels muffled and distant. Ben was in the living room, reading by the fire, when he heard a noise from the back of the house. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again, a soft, scraping sound, like someone dragging something across the floor. He stood up, heart pounding, and walked toward the kitchen. The sound stopped. He flipped on the light, but the room was empty. He checked the back door, locked. The windows, locked. He told himself it was nothing, just the house settling. But as he turned to leave, he saw footprints in the snow outside the kitchen window. Fresh, leading from the woods to the house, then back again. He called the police, but by the time they arrived, the tracks were gone, covered by new snow. Ben spent the rest of the night sitting by the fire, shotgun in his lap, listening to the wind and waiting for morning. Ben's story didn't end that night. For weeks after, he kept finding strange signs around the property. Once, he woke up to find the barn door wide open, snow drifting in, even though he knew he'd locked it the night before. Another time, he found muddy handprints on the back porch, smeared across the glass like someone had pressed their face and palms against it, peering in. He started keeping the lights on all night, sleeping with the shotgun propped against the wall. One evening, just after sunset, Ben's phone rang. It was his wife, calling to check in. As they talked, he heard a noise from the front porch. A slow, deliberate creak, like someone stepping onto the old wooden boards. He froze, listening. The footsteps moved across the porch, then stopped right outside the door. Ben whispered to his wife to stay on the line and crept to the window. He peeked through the curtain and saw a figure standing there, bundled in a heavy coat, face hidden by a hood. The figure didn't knock, didn't move, just stood there, silent and still. Ben's heart hammered in his chest. He whispered into the phone, "Someone's here." His wife told him to call the police, but Ben was afraid to make a sound. He watched as the figure slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. The police arrived 20 minutes later, but found nothing. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. Ben's wife came home the next day, and for a while, things went back to normal. But every winter, when the snow starts to fall and the nights grow long, Ben finds himself listening for footsteps on the porch, wondering if the silent visitor will return. Aftermath. The lingering fear home invasion stories don't just end when the police leave or the locks are changed. The fear lingers, settling into the corners of your mind, making you jump at every creak and shadow. My friend Leela still checks every window before bed, even in her new apartment. My cousin Ben keeps a loaded shotgun by the door, even though he's never had to use it. And me, I still wake up sometimes, heart pounding, convinced I heard footsteps in the hallway. A fourth story. The locked room. I wasn't planning to include this story, but after talking to my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, I knew I had to. She's lived in our neighborhood for over 30 years, and she's seen her share of strange things. But nothing scared her like the night someone tried to break into her house. It was a hot summer night, the kind where you leave the windows open to catch a breeze. Mrs. Patel was in bed, drifting off to sleep, when she heard a noise from the living room. A soft, scraping sound, like someone trying to pry open the window. She sat up, heart racing, and listened. The sound came again, louder this time. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, whispering to the operator that someone was trying to break in. The operator told her to stay quiet and lock herself in a room. Mrs. Patel crept down the hallway, locking herself in the bathroom. She could hear the window sliding open, footsteps on the carpet, the creak of the floorboards as someone moved through the house. She held her breath, listening as the footsteps came closer, then stopped outside the bathroom door. The doorknob rattled, once, twice, then silence. Mrs. Patel stayed in the bathroom, clutching her phone, until she heard the sound of sirens outside. The police found the window open, muddy footprints on the carpet, and a crowbar left behind. The intruder was gone. Mrs. Patel never found out who tried to break in that night. She had new locks and security cameras installed, but she still sleeps with the bathroom door locked, just in case. The unlocked door. Not all home invasions happen at night. Sometimes, the scariest moments come in broad daylight, when you least expect them. My friend Marcus learned that the hard way. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Marcus was home alone, working on his laptop in the living room. He heard the front door open and assumed it was his roommate coming home. He called out a greeting, but got no response. A few seconds later, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Marcus stood up and walked to the door, expecting to see his roommate. Instead, he found a stranger standing in the hallway, a man in his 30s, wearing a baseball cap and a backpack. The man looked just as surprised as Marcus. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man mumbled something about looking for someone, then turned and walked out the door. Marcus watched as he got into a car parked down the street and drove away. He called the police, who told him it was probably a burglar looking for an easy target. After that, Marcus always made sure to lock the door, even when he was home. He still wonders what would have happened if he hadn't gotten up, if he'd been in another room, if the man had decided not to leave. The weight of vulnerability. These stories all have one thing in common. They remind us how vulnerable we really are. No matter how many locks you have, how many alarms you set, there's always a way in. The fear doesn't go away, it just changes shape. settling into your routines, your habits, your sense of safety. The stories I've shared so far are the kind that make you double-check your locks and peek through the blinds before bed. But sometimes, the scariest home invasions aren't about strangers breaking in. They're about the people you already know, the ones you trust. A fifth story, the familiar face. My cousin Rachel was in college, living in a small off-campus house with two friends. They were careful, always locking the doors, never opening up for strangers. But one night, Rachel woke up to the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. She assumed it was her roommate, Sarah, getting a late-night snack. She got up to say hi, but when she walked into the kitchen, she found a man standing by the fridge. At first, she thought it was Sarah's boyfriend, but as her eyes adjusted, she realized she didn't recognize him at all. He was wearing a hoodie, his face half hidden in the shadows. Rachel froze. The man turned, startled, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Then he bolted for the back door, slamming it behind him. Rachel locked the door and called the police, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. When the police arrived, they found that the man had used a spare key hidden under a flower pot to get in. He hadn't taken anything, just wandered through the house, opening cabinets and drawers, as if he was looking for something specific. Rachel and her roommates changed the locks the next day and never kept a spare key outside again. The unseen intruder. Sometimes, you don't even know someone's been in your house until it's too late. My friend Kevin learnt that the hard way. Kevin lived alone in a small apartment. He was a creature of habit, same routine every day, same route to work, same time home every night. One evening he came home to find his front door slightly ajar. He assumed he'd forgotten to lock it, but when he walked inside, everything looked normal. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. It wasn't until later that night, when he went to bed, that he noticed something strange. His pillow was on the wrong side of the bed. The glass of water he always kept on the nightstand was empty, even though he hadn't touched it. And there was a faint, unfamiliar smell in the air, something musky, like old cologne. Kevin's skin crawled. He checked every room, every closet, every corner of the apartment, but found nothing. He tried to sleep, but every sound made him jump. The next morning he installed new locks and a security camera. He never found out who had been in his apartment, or what they'd done while he was gone. The camera technology can make us feel safer, but sometimes it just reveals things we wish we'd never seen. My neighbor Tom installed a security camera after a string of break-ins in our area. He set it up to send alerts to his phone whenever it detected motion. One night Tom was out of town for work. He got a notification from the camera around 2 a.m. He opened the app and watched as a man in a ski mask walked up to his front door, tried the handle, and then looked straight into the camera. The man smiled, waved, and walked away. Tom called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. When Tom got home, he found muddy footprints on the porch and a single glove left on the welcome mat. The police never caught the man, but Tom still gets chills when he thinks about that smile. The locked bedroom. Not all home invasions end with the intruder leaving. Sometimes, they're still there, hiding in plain sight. My friend Emily was house-sitting for her aunt one summer. The house was big and old, with creaky floors and lots of empty rooms. One night, Emily heard a noise from upstairs, a soft thump, like something falling. She grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate, but found nothing out of place. The next morning, she noticed that the door to the guest bedroom was locked. She tried the handle, but it wouldn't budge. She called her aunt, who said the door shouldn't be locked. There was no key for it. Emily called a locksmith who came and picked the lock. When they opened the door, they found a pile of blankets on the floor, an empty soda can, and a half-eaten sandwich. Someone had been living in the room, sneaking in and out while Emily slept. The police never found out who it was, or how long they'd been there. Emily moved out the next day. The weight of paranoia after hearing so many stories. It's easy to become paranoid. You start to see threats everywhere, in the shadows outside, your window, in the creak of the floorboards, in the silence that settles over the house at night. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe a little fear is what keeps us safe. The stories kept coming, each one a little different, but all with the same underlying fear, the sense that your home, your sanctuary, can be violated in an instant. Some people move on, change the locks, buy a dog, or install cameras. Others never really recover. They live with the knowledge that safety is an illusion, that the world outside can slip in through the smallest crack. A sixth story, the wrong address. My friend Jordan lived in a duplex on a quiet street. One night, he woke up to the sound of someone pounding on the front door. It was 3 a.m., and the neighborhood was silent. Jordan got up, heart racing, and looked through the peephole. A man was standing on the porch, wild-eyed, muttering to himself, and slamming his fists against the door. Jordan called the police, whispering into the phone as the pounding grew louder. The man started shouting, demanding to be let in, insisting that this is my house. Jordan's roommate woke up and joined him at the door, both of them terrified. The man tried the doorknob, then started kicking the door, leaving muddy boot prints on the wood. The police arrived just as the man was trying to break a window. They tackled him on the lawn and dragged him away, still screaming that they were in his house. Later, they found out he was high, confused, and had wandered in from a party a few blocks away. But for weeks after, Jordan and his roommate jumped at every sound, flinched at every knock, and never slept quite as soundly again. The disappearing intruders. Sometimes, the scariest part of a home invasion is not knowing if it ever really ended. My aunt and uncle live in a small town, the kind where everyone knows each other and nothing bad ever happens, until it does. One night, they woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My uncle grabbed a baseball bat and crept out of the bedroom, but found nothing. The front door was locked, the windows shut. They checked every room, every closet, but the house was empty. The next morning, they found muddy footprints in the living room, leading from the back door to the hallway and then stopping abruptly. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks, nothing missing. The police said it was probably just a prank, maybe a neighbor's kid sneaking in for a dare. But my aunt swears she still hears footsteps at night, soft and slow, moving through the house when everyone else is asleep. She leaves a light on in the hallway now, just in case. The unlocked window. My own story happened when I was in college, living in a ground-floor apartment with 2 roommates. We were careful, always locking the doors, checking the windows before bed. But one night I woke up to the sound of someone breathing, not snoring, not sleep-talking, breathing, slow and heavy, right next to my bed. I froze, too scared to move. I could feel the weight of someone standing over me, could hear the soft rustle of clothes, the faint smell of sweat and cigarettes. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was just a nightmare. When I finally worked up the courage to open my eyes, the room was empty. The window was open, the curtain fluttering in the breeze. I got up and checked the apartment. My roommates were asleep, their doors closed. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. But I knew someone had been there. I could still feel the presence, the cold fear settling in my chest. After that night, I never slept with a window open again. The weight of survival. Home invasion stories aren't just about fear, they're about survival. About what you do when the worst happens, when the safety net is gone and you're left to fend for yourself. Some people freeze, some fight, some run, but everyone is changed. My friend Leela from the window story started taking self-defense classes. My cousin Ben bought a bigger dog. My neighbor Tom moved to a new city, hoping to leave the fear behind. But the truth is, you never really do. The memory lingers, a shadow at the edge of your mind, a reminder that safety is never guaranteed. A final story. The locked basement. My grandfather's house had a basement that was always locked. He said it was just for storage, nothing interesting down there. But as a kid, I was convinced there was something more. One night, when I was 12, I woke up to the sound of footsteps coming from the basement. Slow, heavy, dragging footsteps, moving up the stairs. I lay in bed, heart pounding, listening as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped. The doorknob rattled, then went still. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard the footsteps retreat, back down into the darkness. The next morning, I asked my grandfather about it. He just smiled and said, "That's why we keep the door locked." I never asked again. The unanswered questions. Every home invasion story leaves questions behind. Who was the man on the porch? What did the intruder want? How long had someone been living in the locked bedroom? Sometimes, you get answers. Most of the time, you don't. You just learn to live with the uncertainty, to accept that some things will never make sense. The stories I've told so far are the kind that make you rethink what it means to feel safe. But there's another layer to home invasion horror. The aftermath. The way it changes you, even if you never see the intruder's face. The way it makes you question every sound, every shadow, every routine you once trusted. The night visitor. My friend Sam lived in a small house on the edge of town. He was a light sleeper, always waking up at the slightest noise. One night he woke to the sound of someone tapping on his bedroom window. At first he thought it was a tree branch, but the tapping was too rhythmic, too deliberate. He got up and looked outside, but saw nothing. The next night, it happened. Again, tap, 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 always at the same time, always just loud enough to wake him. Sam started sleeping with a flashlight and a baseball bat by his bed. He set up a camera hoping to catch whoever was messing with him. The footage showed nothing. No movement, no shadows, just the empty yard and the swaying trees. But the tapping continued, night after night, until Sam was so exhausted he could barely function. He moved his bed to the other side of the room. But the tapping followed, always at the window closest to where he slept. Eventually Sam moved out. The new tenants never reported anything strange, but Sam still jumps at the sound of tapping, even years later. The disguised intruder sometimes, the person who breaks in, isn't a stranger at all. My friend Julia worked as a nanny for a wealthy family in the city. She lived in their guest house, a cozy little place at the back of the property. One afternoon, while the family was away, Julia heard someone knocking at the door. She looked through the peephole and saw a delivery man holding a package. She opened the door, expecting a signature form. Instead, the man shoved her inside, slammed the door, and locked it behind him. He wasn't a delivery man at all, just someone who'd stolen a uniform and used it to get past the security gate. Julia fought back, screaming and kicking, and managed to break free. She ran to the main house and set off the alarm. The intruder fled, but not before stealing her wallet and phone. The Polisanova caught him, but Julia learned to trust her instincts. Now, she never opens the door for anyone she doesn't know, no matter what uniform they're wearing. The hidden room. My uncle's house had a hidden room behind a bookshelf in the basement. It was a leftover from Prohibition, a secret space where people used to hide liquor. The room was small and dark, with a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. One summer, my cousin and I decided to explore the room. We found old bottles, dusty crates, and a pile of newspapers from the 1920s. But we also found something else. A sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a stack of empty food wrappers. Someone had been living in the room, sneaking in and out without anyone noticing. We told my uncle, who called the police. They searched the property but found no sign of the intruder. The only clue was a note left on the wall, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Don't tell. I'm just passing through." My uncle sealed up the room after that, but I still wonder who was living there, and how long they watched us before we found their hiding place. The unseen threat. Not every home invasion leaves physical evidence. Sometimes, it's just a feeling, a sense that something is wrong, that you're not alone. My friend Tara lived in a high-rise apartment, surrounded by neighbors, security cameras, and locked doors. But she always felt like someone was watching her. She'd come home to find things moved, lights left on, windows open that she was sure she'd closed. She changed the locks, installed new cameras, even got a dog, but the feeling never went away. One night, she woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She grabbed her phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, the apartment was empty. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. But Tara knew, deep down, that someone had been there. She moved out a month later, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The lasting impact. Home invasion horror isn't just about the moment of fear, it's about what comes after. The sleepless nights, the jumpy nerves, the way you start to see danger in every shadow. It's about learning to live with the knowledge that safety is never guaranteed, that the world can change in an instant. Some people move on, rebuild, find new routines. Others carry the fear with them, a constant companion in the back of their minds. But everyone who's lived through it knows one thing: you never look at your home the same way again. There's a moment after a home invasion when the world feels different. The walls that once felt solid now seem thin. The locks you trusted feel like little more than suggestions. You start to notice every sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floor, the wind rattling the windows. You wonder if you ever really knew what safety was, or if it was just something you believed because you had to. I think about all the stories I've heard and told: the man in the hallway, the silent figure on the porch, the stranger at the window, the friend who wasn't a friend at all, the people who slipped in through unlocked doors, hidden rooms, or the smallest crack in a routine. Each story is different, but they all share the same lesson. It can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. If you're listening to this, maybe you're thinking about your own home. Maybe you're remembering a time when you felt a chill in the air, or saw something out of place, or woke up in the middle of the night convinced you weren't alone. Maybe you're double-checking the locks right now, or peeking through the blinds, just to be sure. That's the thing about home invasion horror. It's not just about the break-in, it's about the way it lingers, the way it changes you. It's about the questions that never get answered. Who was the man on the porch? What did the intruder want? How long had someone been living in the hidden room? Sometimes, you get closure. Most of the time, you don't. You just learn to live with the uncertainty, to accept that some things will never make sense. But there's another side to these stories too. The way people come together after something terrible happens. The neighbor who checks in, the friend who offers a place to stay, the family who helps you change the locks and install new lights. The way you learn to trust your instincts, to listen to that little voice that says something isn't right. The way you find strength you didn't know you had. I still remember the first night after our break-in. I sat in the living room, lights on, dog at my feet, listening to the silence. Every sound made me jump, every shadow looked suspicious. But as the hours passed, I realized something. I was still here. The house was still standing. The world hadn't ended. I was scared, but I wasn't broken. That's what survival looks like. It's not about being fearless. It's about being afraid and moving forward anyway. It's about learning to live with the fear, to let it sharpen your senses without letting it control your life. It's about finding a new kind of safety, one that comes from within. So if you've ever lived through something like this, know that you're not alone. There are thousands of people out there who know exactly what you're feeling. People who have learned to sleep with the lights on, to check the locks twice, to trust their gut when something feels off. People who have rebuilt, who have found new routines, who have learned to live with the uncertainty. And if you haven't, if you're listening to these stories and thinking it could never happen to you, remember this: safety is never guaranteed. But that doesn't mean you have to live in fear. It just means you have to be aware, to be prepared, to trust yourself. It means knowing that the world can change in an instant, but you can change with it. These were 3 true home invasion horror stories, and a few more, because the truth is, there are countless ways for fear to find its way in, but there are just as many ways to fight back, to survive, to reclaim your space. Your home is still yours, even after the worst has happened. The fear may linger, but so does your strength. So tonight, when you lock your doors and turn out the lights, take a moment to appreciate the quiet. Listen to the sounds of your home, the ones you know by heart. And if you hear something you can't explain, if you feel that chill run down your spine, remember, you're not alone. There are others out there, listening, surviving, moving forward. And together we make the darkness just a little less frightening.